Welcome to Talking Insights. I'm your host, Antonio. Today we're here with the brilliant Dr. Vivienne Ming. She's going to present on stage at the Esomar Congress here in Athens. And I just got her just before she got there. So we'll talk a bit about AI and the human condition and how we can look within ourselves and find our originality. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, as always. Long ago, I was a professor at the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience at UC Berkeley and at Stanford. And in trying to study the brain, we were also studying AI. Okay. So I study people, but it ends up people want to talk to me about AI, and they're very related.
And do you like to talk with people about AI, or do you prefer to talk with people?
No, I mean, the very first project I ever worked on as an undergraduate was with $5 million from the CIA to do real-time facial analysis for lie detection. And I thought I was going to stick wires into rats and record activity in cells, and then my undergraduate honors thesis could find your pupils and your philtrum and tell the difference between a real and a fake smile. And I was kind of hooked. It's a tool for me. Mm-hmm. I like to use it to study people, whether their brains or their behavior at scale, rather than I'm really interested in the mathematical principles of AI. I am kind of interested in that too, but it's not my field of research. And my companies have used AI in education. They've used AI in hiring. Now I'm back in sort of my home domain. I have a couple of companies working on Alzheimer's and postpartum depression, but still fundamentally about AI. So I'm not committed. I'm interested pretty broadly about people, and it's this incredibly powerful tool for understanding humans.
So how long have you been working with the facial recognition?
Yeah, well, that was my very first project long ago. So that was 25 years ago. So long before the current excitement around artificial intelligence, but obviously AI has excited people's imagination for quite some time. I did my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and that's where Alan Newell and Herb Simon invented the first AI that could play chess, the first AI that could prove mathematical theorems way back in the early 60s. It's obviously changed completely from what they did back then. But it's, when you can program up on a computer with my own fingers and my own mind, and you can understand the mathematical principles of something that does something as human as recognize a real smile. Or in my recent work, we've analyzed language to predict suicide risk, or to understand when two people trust each other or not by using AI to analyze their brain activity. The border between what's AI and what's human can get a little fuzzy, and in ways that really interest me.
So while you were speaking, I was thinking about something. A couple of days ago, I was talking with a colleague, and he's also kind of like starting to understand like AI. He wants to learn all the tools, like all the cool new tools that all the cool new kids are using. And he was showing me this website where you can basically, every time you refresh the website, he generates a picture of a person, like a face of a person. And it's all AI, like it's all AI generated. Do you think in the future, or like with the evolvement of technology, this type of face recognition will kind of mingle with this generative face construction?
So the most recent version of GPT, as well of Gemini, which is Google's version of these tools, have moved from large language models, LLMs, to LMMs, large multimodal models. So they do images and sound. It can take sound as an input and put an image as an output. You can have text behind. So as far as the AI is concerned, it's all just numbers. Right. Different modules within the system turn sound or images or text into numbers. And internally, it can transform. And again, when I talked about how AI and humans, we have parts of our brain that are kind of specifically about processing multimodal information. And so looking at how those transformations take place is fascinating. But in a practical terms, the idea that you can just talk to the computer, potentially talk to a face that is talking back to you, seems, to be perfectly honest, like a huge waste of processing time to generate this face on the fly, but theoretically very doable. And in doing so, you describe as though you were talking to an app developer. You describe the app that you want. Right. What do you want it to do? The kind of color scheme it might have. It might interrupt you and ask you some questions back. That is a very human, natural kind of interaction within the bleeding edge, but of existing models today. GPT, Gemini, a couple of others. These are doable things. And realistically, I'm a big believer in humanity, but if this follows the trend, this system would be better than the average professional doing the job today, which could make us feel really worried. It could make us think, well, that's wonderful, because most of what we ask developers to do is pretty routine and rote, so we can cut out all of that busy work and just really get down to it. Obviously, there's issues about whether the AI would make mistakes or become a fabulist making up elements of itself that you didn't ask for. Yeah. But the truth is humans make mistakes too. And so one of the real questions we might ask ourselves in that kind of interaction that maybe we're both envisioning right now is, what are we looking for out of that interaction? Just a moment of kind of human contact? Are we looking for an amazing app or an image design or a website or a piece of art or a piece of engineering or whatever it might be, a diagnosis? Or are we looking to press into the unknown? Are we looking for the creation of something that hasn't existed before? That last one is beyond any existing model.
Right.
By their very nature, AI is trained on what already exists. And it doesn't mean it can't kind of mash two things up to sort of create something new, but there is a point at which you extend beyond what an AI can do and into this space of uncertainty, of exploration, of a kind of disruptive innovation that humans are terrible at it. But we're also the only thing, including AI, that can actually do that kind of work still today. So that was a big answer to a very straightforward question. But
so do you think I'll be able to skip meetings?
I would say the following. I've had the chance to sit in on some big companies rolling out new AI tools. And I'll note one in particular in doing a training for the senior executive team. Their top two use cases for, to use the term of art of the day, generative AI, number one was stop wasting time with email. Let AI read your email and summarize it for you. Number two was stop wasting time writing email. Let AI write your email for you. And some others were about putting slides together or writing up company memos. I think we can cut out the middleman in this process. Maybe we should just stop writing terrible emails that nobody wants to read. So I will say this, if the right solution, too many emails in your inbox or too many people wanting you to put slides together for a presentation, is you rely on an AI to do it. It probably didn't need to get said in the first place.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something we should ask ourselves again. Just being human separate from AI is, if this isn't uniquely what I would say, different than anyone else in the entire world, why am I saying it?
So speaking on that, like, one of the things that I like to say is that the human touch, or the human touch when you're writing something or when you're saying something, it kind of touches what you were saying previously, like it's the error. Humans make mistakes, and that's the human touch. Do you think if we start to only do AI and do, like, we get our emails in AI, the answers back, he texts back, and it's just an AI conversation, do you think we'll lose that? which is not bad because we'll skip the mistakes, but at the same time we'll miss the human touch.
You know, it's interesting. Certainly making mistakes is human, but AI, even the latest versions of GPT and Gemini and Claude, which is a pretty good writer as well, also makes certain kinds of mistakes. Though usually, I wish my students wrote as well. I wish my graduate students wrote as well as Claude did, at least in terms of getting syntax and punctuation right. But what's interesting is it's not just about errors. I have a particular voice to my writing. Some of it's hard to describe. Some of it's a little easier. My writing tends to throw around the occasional F-bomb for no good reason. It just amuses me. I make lots of science fiction and Simpsons references in my writing, even when I'm supposed to be talking to very important people. Probably most of your listeners have heard of the concept of a long tail and a distribution, the long tail of the distribution, particularly for an organization like this. We should all know what that means. It turns out in some way, all of us, a part of us, is out in that long tail. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's medical. Yep. There is something in this entire hotel, that thousands of people who might be here today, there are aspects of your epigenome mm-hmm. that are unique to you, different than everyone else here, possibly everyone else in all of Athens. Yep. And they're not just unique to you in a boring way, unique to you in a medically meaningful way. They're the parts of you that exist way out on this long tail, very rare, but also really important. They're not errors. Yep. They are you. The way we use language follows a long tail. Most of what we say is highly regular and sounds a lot like an LLM. But each of us use language in such a way that falls way out on that tail. What's interesting, say, with large language models is they live very much in the meat of the distribution. They spend very little time out in that tail. You can push them out there, get them to say, imagine that you're Homer, but writing a Shakespearean sonnet. You can really push it out into some weird spaces. But even then, it's kind of like the average of the better half of the internet.
Right.
And when your specific example of AIs talking to AIs, when in fact that begins to happen, there was a paper that came out about that in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And when they found, not only when they talk to each other, but when they start learning from each other, the tail disappears and it collapses down into gibberish, nonsense, the entire model fails. So one thing we haven't figured out how to do, however human-seeming generative image models and generative language models may seem, they're missing that long-tailed component that in a sense all of us get for free by being imperfect. Right. And it turns out that's incredibly important. Without it, you're just saying the same thing over and over again. And we need a real breakthrough in machine learning to be able to more accurately capture those long tails, because it seems like so much of what we do is all in the meat of these distributions, all where the central mass of the distribution is. But actually what's interesting about each of us, if you want to understand, let's say in the context of Esomar, if you want to understand the heterogeneity of your market, how it's different, one region, one person versus another, it's those long tails. Right. And existing models don't handle that very well.
That uniqueness that you're mentioning, that long tail, do you think people, the humans in general, will eventually, because my understanding is that people are kind of starting to get into the molds. Like, obviously we have that long tail, but then we have the whole other parts, and we're starting to like become almost as a copy of each other. The same thing as the AI is starting to become a copy of each other. Do you think that in the future the humans need to or will learn to identify that uniqueness about themselves and then teach the AI? Or
So-
will it just become like one major thing?
Here is a real tension. I'm saying that humans' unique value add in a world where existing AIs can do a lot of previously very highly paid jobs better than we can. Do I think those jobs get fully automated? Probably not. The existing trend is what we call deprofessionalization. So that university education you used to need to be able to do basic contract legal work, you don't really need it anymore. So does that job disappear? But now a paralegal can do as well as a lawyer when they have AI as a tool. And that pressure is powerful and it will affect societies. Interestingly enough, though, that leaves this whole other space of work, the space which is in some sense infinite, which is all of the work that takes true creativity. If you really thought of all labor, including the people cleaning this hotel, which is typically some of the worst wage power labor that's out there, if you rethought of it as creative labor, well, first off, you'd have to change the job completely. What did it even mean? But that's what would make it a uniquely human job. So here's the tension. At the same time that we are both robbing ourselves of all of the easy jobs and yet unlocking this potential for humans to spread out into this whole other space, we are also closing doors on our own creativity. So in my research, we'll call this computational social science. We're using AI, for example, to read every book ever written or to analyze everyone's conversations on social media and draw insights from that. And one of the things that we see is actually something that's terrifying. Over time, as the amount of information that's available increases, and in this rare instance, when I say it increases exponentially, I mean it literally. The number of scientific papers that get published within fields is exploding exponentially. The number of songs produced every year is going up exponentially. We can go through all this whole list from everyday experiences to elite professional experiences, and there's this mass of information. So here's what's terrifying. Within a discipline of science, as the rate of information increases exponentially, the rate of innovation decreases, not relative to that increase. It decreases in absolute terms. So we call this the information exploration paradox. There's so much more information available today, and that unfortunately we humans respond to that by exploring less, the exact opposite of what we ought to do. So instead, we look over at what our neighbors are doing. It could be our neighbors in the sense that they're a professional peer. What are the famous scientists in my field publishing? I should publish something like them. But, for example, in music, you can very clearly see that these rich get richer network effects are dominating people's preferences. So in that sense, you're absolutely right. We're becoming copies of one another exactly when we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
We're using, to the degree that AIs can play a role in this story, we could use it to help explore that long tail and create a playlist just for me. But overwhelmingly, we're using it to simply find out what all of my friends are listening to and play the exact same music, or the exact same scientific papers, or make the exact same stock movements. That latter, all of these should scare us. If innovation is slowing down simply because information is getting overwhelming for our weird hominid brains, that's one of the most terrifying things I've come across in all of my research. And we need to be able to break through that to really get through. Again, not the least of which is because what is our value if it's not us uniquely? And maybe to make this more human and less about big numbers, how do we instill the courage into existing and next generations to tell us when we're wrong? To have the courage to stand up and say, I've got a different idea than you. And it's probably not the magic idea we're all looking for, but I'm going to pitch it anyways, because if it is, it will change everything. Right. And right now, we're not pitching those ideas. We're not even exploring them. We're just herding around safe answers. And again, I don't mean that I don't mean that as just a statement of philosophy. I mean, we can see it in the data of massive numbers of human beings making decisions, from the professional to the personal.
Doing homework. I think that was the sentence that I most listened throughout this event. People need to do their homework. People need to do their research. And it's kind of interesting in a market research conference like this, people say that they need to do their research, but they need to understand what they're looking at and understand, like, this is what I need to explore. And as you're saying, like, I feel that for the humans, like, the humans need to explore themselves, understand themselves first, and then we can explore the rest. This conversation was really interesting, Dr. Vivienne. I'm glad that I got you, like, right up before you go on stage. We'll link your presentation on the show notes. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. I'm going to be there. I'm just going to go after it. Thank you very much for this conversation. We could talk for hours with this. And,
it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And for everyone listening, don't forget to subscribe and like. And we'll be releasing all these episodes in a weekly basis. So stay tuned for more.